On February 9th, 2004, a promising young nursing student named Maura Murray vanished without a trace on a snowy road in New Hampshire. What started as a simple car accident would become one of America's most puzzling missing person cases, spawning countless theories and leaving her family desperate for answers nearly 2 decades later. Maura was a 21-year-old University of Massachusetts Amherst student, described by friends and family as intelligent, athletic, and determined. She was a track star, honor student, and seemed to have her life on track. But, beneath the surface, Maura was struggling with personal issues that would come to light after her disappearance. On the evening of February 9th, Maura was working her security job at the university when she received a phone call that left her visibly upset. Witnesses say she was crying and appeared distressed. Her supervisor allowed her to leave early. What happened in that phone call remains a mystery to this day. The next morning, Maura sent emails to her professors and work supervisor, claiming there had been a death in the family and she would be out for a week. This was a lie. There had been no family death. She then withdrew $280 from an ATM, packed her belongings from her dorm room, and loaded them into her 1996 Saturn sedan. Around 7:30 p.m., Maura's car crashed into a snowbank on Route 112 in Haverhill, New Hampshire, near a sharp curve known as the Weathered Barn Curve. A local bus driver named Butch Atwood stopped to help. He later said Maura appeared uninjured but shaken, and she declined his offer to call police, insisting she had already called AAA. Atwood returned home and called police anyway, concerned for the young woman's safety. When officers arrived just minutes later, Maura was gone. Her car was locked, her belongings were inside, but she had vanished into the frigid New Hampshire wilderness. The investigation revealed disturbing details. Maura had been drinking. There was spilled wine in her car and a box of wine in her belongings. She had been struggling academically and had recently been caught using a stolen credit card. Her relationship with her boyfriend was troubled, and she had been acting erratically in the days before her disappearance. But the most puzzling question remained: where did she go? Search teams combed the surrounding wilderness for weeks. Helicopters, search dogs, and volunteers scoured the area. Despite temperatures well below freezing, and Maura being dressed in only light clothing, no trace of her was found. Over the years, theories have ranged from the plausible to the bizarre. Some believe Maura succumbed to the elements after wandering into the wilderness, disoriented from the accident and alcohol. Others suspect she was picked up by someone with malicious intent. A third theory suggests she staged her own disappearance to start a new life. Her family, led by her father Fred Murray, has never stopped searching. They've hired private investigators, maintained websites, and kept her story in the public eye. But nearly 20 years later, Maura Murray's fate remains unknown. The case of Maura Murray reminds us how quickly someone can vanish, leaving behind only questions and heartbreak. Somewhere in New Hampshire, answers may still be waiting to be discovered. Until then, Maura's family continues to hope, and investigators continue to search for the truth behind one of America's most enduring mysteries. In the summer of 1992 and early 1993, the canal system that winds through Phoenix, Arizona, became the hunting ground for a killer who would claim the lives of at least 9 people. The Phoenix Canal murders, also known as the Baseline Killer case, created a reign of terror that lasted months and highlighted the vulnerability of those living on society's margins. The Salt River Project Canal system in Phoenix serves as both a vital water source and an unfortunate magnet for the city's homeless population. The canals provide water and shelter, but they also create isolated areas perfect for criminal activity. It was in these waterways that a predator found his victims. The first body was discovered in August 1992. Angela Brosso, a 22-year-old woman, was found floating in the Arizona Canal. She had been decapitated. The brutality of the crime shocked investigators, but they had no idea this was just the beginning of a series that would terrorize Phoenix. Over the following months, more bodies appeared in the canal system. The victims were diverse, men and women, different ages and backgrounds, but they shared common vulnerabilities. Many were homeless, transient, or involved in high-risk activities that made them easy targets for a predator. Melanie Burness, a 17-year-old girl, was found shot to death near a canal in September 1992. In November, the body of Roberta Morin was discovered. The killer seemed to be targeting people who wouldn't be immediately missed, whose disappearances might not trigger intensive investigations. Phoenix police faced enormous challenges in connecting the crimes. The victims came from different walks of life. The murder methods varied, and the canal system covered a vast area. Some bodies showed signs of sexual assault, others appeared to be random killings. The lack of witnesses and physical evidence made the investigation extremely difficult. What investigators didn't realize at the time was that they were dealing with two different killers operating in the same area. This confusion would persist for years and complicate efforts to solve the cases. The case remained largely cold until 2006, when advances in DNA technology allowed investigators to re-examine evidence. They discovered that several of the canal murders could be linked to two different perpetrators through DNA evidence. Mark Goudeau was eventually identified as responsible for some of the murders. Known as the Baseline Killer, Goudeau was already serving time for a series of other murders, rapes, and robberies in the Phoenix area. DNA evidence connected him to several of the canal victims. The second perpetrator was identified as Dale Hausner, who, along with Samuel Dieterman, had committed what became known as the Phoenix serial shootings. While primarily known for random drive-by shootings, investigators connected Hausner to some of the canal murders through ballistic evidence and witness testimony. Both men were eventually convicted and sentenced to death for their crimes, though Hausner died by suicide in prison in 2013 before his execution could be carried out. Despite these convictions, not all of the canal murders have been solved. Some cases remain open, suggesting there may have been additional perpetrators, or that some deaths initially attributed to murder may have been accidents or suicides. The transient nature of the victim population made comprehensive investigation challenging. The Phoenix Canal murders highlighted serious issues about how society treats its most vulnerable members. The fact that multiple killers could operate in the same area for months, targeting homeless individuals and others on society's margins, raised questions about police resources and priorities. The canal system in Phoenix still exists, still provides water to the desert city, and unfortunately, still attracts vulnerable populations seeking shelter. The murders of the early 1990s serve as a reminder of how predators exploit societal blind spots to find victims. While justice was eventually served for many of these crimes, the Phoenix Canal murders remain a dark chapter in the city's history. They remind us that every victim, regardless of their circumstances, deserves justice, and that society must do better to protect its most vulnerable members from those who would prey upon them. On January 23, 1959, 9 experienced hikers set out on a trek through the northern Ural Mountains in Russia. None of them would return alive, and their deaths would become one of the most perplexing and terrifying mysteries of the 20th century. The group was led by Igor Dyatlov, a 23-year-old engineering student who was an expert skier and mountaineer. The other members were all experienced hikers from the Ural Polytechnical Institute. Their goal was to reach Atorton, a mountain whose name means "don't go there" in the local Mansi language. The expedition was supposed to be challenging but not dangerous. These were skilled outdoorsmen who knew how to handle harsh winter conditions. They had proper equipment, plenty of food, and a detailed plan. On February the 1st, the group made camp on the slopes of Kholat Syakhl, another mountain whose name translates to Dead Mountain. It would be their final camp. When the group failed to return by their scheduled date of February 12th, a search party was organised. What they found when they reached the campsite defied all explanation. The tent had been cut open from the inside, as if the hikers had desperately tried to escape something. But escape from what? The cuts were made with a knife, slicing through the tent fabric in several places. Whatever had frightened them, it was urgent enough that they couldn't even take the time to open the tent flap. Even more disturbing, the hikers had fled into the freezing wilderness without proper clothing. Some were barefoot, others wore only underwear. The temperature that night was approximately 25 degrees Fahrenheit. In such conditions, inadequately dressed people would die within minutes. The bodies were found scattered across the mountainside. The first 5 bodies were discovered relatively quickly, but it took months to find the remaining 4. They were buried under several feet of snow in a ravine about 75 meters from the tent. The condition of the bodies raised even more questions. Some showed signs of hypothermia, which would be expected, but others had injuries that couldn't be explained by the cold or by falls. One victim, Lyudmila Dubanina, was found with her tongue missing. Another, Alexander Kolevatov, had missing eyes. Semyon Zolotaryov had major chest injuries. His ribs were fractured, but there were no external wounds. The force required to cause such injuries was compared to a car crash. Most puzzling of all, some of the victims' clothing was found to be radioactive. The levels weren't lethal, but they were significantly higher than normal background radiation. The official Soviet investigation concluded that the deaths were caused by a compelling natural force. But what natural force could cause 9 experienced hikers to flee their tent in terror, run barefoot into a deadly blizzard, and sustain such mysterious injuries? Over the decades, numerous theories have emerged. Some suggest an avalanche, but the slope wasn't steep enough and there was no evidence of avalanche activity. Others propose military testing. The area was known to be used for secret weapons testing, and the radiation found on the clothing supports this theory. More exotic theories include everything from Yeti attacks to UFO encounters, but these lack credible evidence. In 2019, Russian authorities reopened the investigation, concluding that a rare weather phenomenon called a katabatic wind may have created conditions that terrified the hikers and caused them to flee. However, this explanation still doesn't account for all the strange evidence. What makes the Dyatlov Pass incident so haunting is the combination of the inexplicable behavior of the victims and the mysterious nature of their injuries. These were rational, experienced people who made a decision that guaranteed their deaths. What could have been so terrifying that it seemed preferable to face certain death in the wilderness? The incident has inspired numerous books, documentaries, and films. The pass where they died has been renamed Dyatlov Pass in honor of the group leader. Recent expeditions to the site have found additional evidence, including items that may have belonged to the hikers. But these discoveries have only deepened the mystery rather than solving it. The Dyatlov Pass incident remains one of the most chilling unsolved mysteries in history. A reminder that sometimes the most terrifying stories are the ones where we never learn what the victims were running from.